Hello friends again, welcome back to Shadows of Revenge. First at all, tell me, where are you from the world watching my video? This is a true story, so watch till end. My name is Garrison Ford. The first lie didn't sound like a lie. It sounded like concern. It arrived wrapped in silk, delivered across a white tablecloth under low restaurant lighting, accompanied by the gentle clink of crystal and the muted confidence of people who believe the world would always make room for them. I remember thinking, as I sat there watching the waiter pour champagne I hadn't ordered, that something about the evening felt rehearsed. Not staged exactly, but timed, like I had been invited not to dinner, but to a performance where my role had already been written. Declan sat across from me, my son, wearing a suit I had bought him years ago when he first told me he wanted to look serious. It didn't quite fit him anymore. Either he had gained weight, or the confidence he wore that night made the fabric strain in new places. Beside him sat Brittany, elegant in a way that felt expensive even before she opened her mouth. Her smile was flawless, practiced, and never quite reached her eyes. They chose the restaurant, a place where menus didn't list prices and the chairs were heavy enough to remind you who belonged there. I ordered sparkling water. Brittany ordered Dom Perignon without asking. Declan didn't object. He never did when she spoke first. We talked about nothing at first. Weather, traffic, a mutual friend's promotion. Brittany touched her stomach once, absent-mindedly, like a reflex she'd practiced in the mirror. Declan noticed. I noticed him noticing. A small exchange passed between them, silent, but loaded. I filed it away without knowing why. Then the folder came out. Declan slid it across the table slowly, as if sudden movement might spook me. His fingers trembled just enough to register. The leather was smooth, new. Inside were papers dense with numbers, signatures, and language designed to exhaust anyone who didn't read contracts for a living. Unfortunately for him, I did. "Dad," he said gently, too gently, "we found a house." Brittany leaned forward. "Not just a house," she corrected. "A home." I didn't open the folder yet. I looked at my son instead. His eyes were bright, too bright, like a man standing on the edge of something he couldn't afford to fall back from. There was excitement there, and fear, the kind that doesn't belong to children anymore. "That's great," I said. "Congratulations." Relief flickered across his face, brief and premature. "It's in a good area," Brittany added. "Safe, quiet, the kind of place you raise a family." Family. She let the word linger, watching me carefully. I opened the folder. The numbers jumped out immediately, not because they were large, but because they were messy. Broker fees that didn't align. A seller listed as an LLC instead of an individual. A timeline that felt rushed, compressed, urgent. Every instinct I had honed over 40 years of forensic auditing stirred awake. "How much?" I asked. Declan swallowed. "The total purchase is 1.2. I waited. "We were hoping," he continued, "that you'd co-sign the mortgage. Just as a guarantor. It doesn't cost you anything unless something goes wrong." Brittany smiled again. "It's just a signature." There it was. The first lie. I closed the folder without responding. The waiter returned with caviar. I hadn't ordered either. Brittany thanked him like this was all perfectly normal. Like my silence was just part of the evening's rhythm. "You have the means," Declan said quietly. "We know that." I looked at him then, really looked. This was my son, the boy who once cried because he'd broken a neighbor's window and couldn't afford to replace it. The teenager who worked summer stocking shelves, so he wouldn't have to ask me for spending money. Somewhere along the way, that boy had been replaced by someone who spoke about my finances as if they were communal property. "You're asking me to underwrite $1 million risk," I said. "That's not nothing." Brittany's eyes hardened, just for a second. "It's family." The word again. Sharper this time. Declan leaned back, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Dad, we don't have time to do this slowly. Things are different now." Different. Another soft word hiding urgency. She reached in her purse then and pulled out her phone. She didn't say anything. She just turned the screen toward me. It was an ultrasound image. Grainy. Cropped. Black and white. A shape that could have been anything if you wanted it badly enough. My heart stuttered anyway. 5 years of silence echoed behind my ribs. 5 years since Catherine's voice had last filled the house. 5 years since the future had narrowed to just me. "A grandson," Brittany said softly. "Or granddaughter. We don't know yet." Declan watched me like a man watching a dam crack. I felt it then. The pull. The instinct to fix, to provide, to protect. Catherine had always wanted grandchildren. She'd kept a cedar chest at the foot of our bed, filled with blankets she'd knitted in quiet hope. She never got to open it. "We want to tell you together," Declan said. "But after you walked out." "I didn't walk out," I said. Brittany tilted her head. "You left." The distinction mattered to me. It didn't to them. They gave me a deadline. 9 a.m. the next morning. Sign the papers, or lose the house. Lose the deposit. Lose, unspoken but implied, my place in this child's life. I didn't answer. I paid my portion of the bill, just the water, and stood. Brittany's smile vanished entirely then. "Think carefully," she said. "You can't take it with you." Outside, the night air cut through the fog in my head. I stood by the valet, phone buzzing in my hand. A message from Declan appeared before I could unlock it. Then another. Then a photo. The ultrasound again. This time with words. "Signed by 9, or you'll never meet him." I nearly went back inside. Instead, I went home. Sleep didn't come. Numbers replaced dreams. I pulled property records, corporate filings, tax documents. The seller LLC traced back to Brittany's brother through 2 shell companies. The urgency made sense now. They weren't buying a home. They were laundering risk. The ultrasound bothered me most. I zoomed in. No patient name. No hospital watermark. A faint stock image code blurred in the corner. By morning, suspicion had eclipsed hope. At 7:14 a.m., my door shook. Declan didn't knock. He pounded. When I opened it, he pushed past me, wild-eyed, breathing hard, desperation spilling off him like sweat. "Sign it," he demanded. "Now." I locked the door calmly. "No." Something broke then. He screamed. He threw a vase, Catherine's, against the wall. Porcelain exploded like gunfire. "I put down 100,000, he shouted. "Do you know what that means?" I froze. "You don't have that," I said. He went quiet. Then, smaller. "I sold something." My garage key fell heavy in my pocket. "What did you sell?" I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The illusion shattered completely when he said the words I'll never forget. It was just a car. And in that moment, I understood. Not just what they had taken, but how long they had been planning to take it. Because lies like this don't happen overnight. They grow. They practice. They wait. And as I stood there in the wreckage of my foyer, staring at the man my son had become, only one thought echoed through my mind. When did family stop meaning protection and start meaning permission? The garage smelled like memory. Old oil. Rubber. The faint ghost of leather conditioner that never quite leaves no matter how many years pass. It was a scent that used to mean weekends to me. Quiet Saturdays with Catherine humming while I polished chrome. Summers spent sanding rust beneath a sun that felt kinder back then. I stood at the threshold of the detached garage behind Declan's rental property and already knew what I was going to see. Knowing doesn't soften the impact. It sharpens it. The padlock was gone. Not broken, cut. Clean, deliberate. The kind of cut made by someone who had practiced. I pushed the side door open, the hinges creaking in protest, and stepped inside. Empty. Where the Shelby GT 500 should have been, there was only a dark rectangle of stained concrete. An absence, so precise it felt intentional. My chest tightened, but no sound came out. Grief doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just removes something and waits for you to notice. He hadn't just sold a car. He had sold his mother. The summers we spent restoring it together. The anniversary drives along Route 66. Catherine's laugh when the engine finally turned over after months of work. He had converted all of that into a down payment on a lie. I drove back in silence, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I didn't call Declan. I didn't call Brittany. I called the police. Reporting your own child for grand larceny feels surreal. Like reciting someone else's lines in a bad play. The words sounded hollow even as I said them clearly. My vehicle was stolen. I know who took it. I want to press charges. They brought him in that afternoon. Declan sat in the holding room, wrists cuffed, face pale and confused. He looked smaller there, less certain. For a moment, just a moment, the father in me almost broke through. Then Brittany arrived. She didn't rush. She never rushed. She carried herself like this was all a misunderstanding she'd resolve with the right paperwork. Which, as it turned out, it was. She opened her portfolio and slid a document across the detective's desk. Cream-colored paper. Crisp. Official. My name at the bottom. A general power of attorney. dated 2 years earlier, during my bypass surgery, a time when I had been unconscious for 6 hours and had signed only a medical proxy, nothing financial. The signature was perfect, the slant, the loops, a masterpiece. "This is a forgery," I said. "It's notarized," Brittany replied calmly. "Filed with the county." The detective sighed, the sound of someone stepping out of responsibility. If the document was valid, this wasn't theft. It was a civil dispute. They uncuffed him. I watched my son rub his wrists, relief flooding his face as he saw Brittany. He hadn't known about the document. That much was clear. This wasn't his plan. It was hers. As they walked toward the exit, Brittany stopped. She leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume. Sweet, expensive, masking rot. "You made a mistake calling the cops," she whispered. "We were going to be nice. We were going to let you be a grandfather." Her smile sharpened. "Now I'm going to take everything." The war began there. I changed the locks that night, installed cameras, and called my lawyer. They sued me 3 days later. The summons arrived like a brick dropped on my kitchen island. A civil lawsuit, breach of verbal contract, intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to the complaint, 5 years earlier, on the day of Catherine's funeral, I had promised Declan a house as part of his inheritance. Standing over her grave, they claimed I made a binding contract. They were weaponizing my grief. The lawsuit alleged that by refusing to honor this promise, I had endangered Brittany's high-risk pregnancy. Pregnancy. The word felt heavier now. Wrong. I didn't sleep. I audited. Property records. Shell companies. Money trails. Every page that slid into my printer tray felt like a nail in a coffin. The seller LLC funneled profits back to Brittany's brother. Inflated prices. Fake urgency. It was real estate fraud dressed up as family planning. But suspicion isn't proof. I needed more. I hired Vance. He used to work for the Treasury, tracking money launderers. Invisible. Thorough. I gave him one target, Brittany Ford. For 5 days, he became her shadow. She claimed she was bedridden. Vance photographed her leaving spin class, sweating and laughing, hitting a vape pen the moment she stepped outside. Nicotine. Day 2. Sushi and sake. Raw fish. Alcohol. Day 3. The medical complex. This was it, I thought. The obstetrician. Vance followed her in, then took the stairs. The elevator didn't stop on 3. It went to 5. Cosmetic, dermatology. Botox. Fillers. Lasers. She emerged an hour later and made a phone call. Vance recorded it. "Hey, babe," she said weakly. "Doctor says the baby's heart rate is irregular. It's the stress. Your father is terrifying me." She hung up and went shoe shopping. I listened to the recording 3 times. Manipulation at its finest. Feeding Declan panic, keeping him angry, using a non-existent crisis as leverage. But photos aren't enough for court. Their lawsuit made the mistake for me. By claiming physical harm due to emotional distress, they had waived medical confidentiality. I filed a motion for discovery. Her full medical history arrived in a plain envelope. The report was clinical. Cold. Bilateral salpingectomy. She was sterile. 3 years earlier. There was no baby. I sat there staring at the paper, feeling something inside me fracture permanently. Not rage. Not triumph. Clarity. Declan didn't know. If he had, he wouldn't be suing me over a child that didn't exist. He was the weapon. She was the architect. My lawyer wanted to end it immediately. Forced dismissal. Expose the fraud. "No," I said. "We go to trial." I wanted her on the stand. Under oath. I wanted Declan to see her lie one more time. Then watch the truth collapse. Courtroom 40 smelled like desperation. Wax floors. Cheap cologne. Brittany wore gray and looked fragile. Declan slumped beside her, defeated. Their lawyer painted me as a miser. A cold man who laughed and walked out on his grieving son. Jurors nodded. They didn't see an auditor. They saw a villain. Declan testified. He cried. He told the story they'd rehearsed. The promise of the grave. The inheritance. I watched him believe it as he spoke. Then Brittany took the stand. She swore she was pregnant. That was when my lawyer stood. The medical records landed on the bench with a sound that felt final. The judge read. Glasses off. Silence heavy. The illusion didn't shatter immediately. It detonated. Brittany screamed. Blamed Declan. Pointed at him like a shield. Something broke in him then. He lunged across the table, screaming that she had sterilized herself. that he'd painted a nursery for a ghost. Bailiffs tackled him. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. The judge's voice cut through it all. Take them both. Handcuffs closed. A ledger balanced. Declan looked at me as they dragged him away, mouthing one word over and over. Dad. I didn't move. Not because I didn't care, but because some debts can't be paid with forgiveness. As the doors closed behind them, the realization settled heavy and irreversible. The knife never touched my skin, but it cut deeper than anything that ever could. The courtroom did not explode into chaos immediately. For a few seconds after the evidence hit the bench, there was only silence. Thick, suffocating, unnatural. The kind of silence that follows a revelation so large it rewires reality. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the faint scratch of the court reporter's keys. I could hear Declan's heart breaking long before his body reacted. The judge read the documents slowly. Too slowly. Medical records. Surgical history. Dates that could not be argued with. Words that did not care about emotions or intentions. Bilateral salpingectomy. Permanent. Irreversible. No pregnancy. No baby. No future that Brittany had described so convincingly for months. Declan turned toward her. At first, his expression wasn't rage. It was confusion. Pure, childlike confusion. The kind a person wears when the ground beneath them disappears and the brain refuses to accept gravity. What does that mean? He whispered. Brittany didn't answer. She didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, posture rigid, like someone waiting out a storm they believed they could survive. Her silence was louder than any confession. Sterling, their lawyer, tried to speak. He cleared his throat, shuffled papers, opened his mouth, then closed it again. He knew. Everyone in that room knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't reckless behavior. This was calculated fraud. Declan stood up. The bailiff moved instinctively, hand drifting toward his belt, sensing what was coming before it happened. Declan's chair scraped violently against the floor, the sound slicing through the courtroom. You told me, he said, his voice cracking, volume rising with every word. You told me there was a baby. Brittany finally turned. Her eyes were sharp now, angry, cornered. You're overreacting, she snapped. You don't understand medicine. The judge slammed the gavel. Sit down, he ordered. Declan didn't. His hand was shaking. His breathing had gone ragged, like a man drowning on dry land. He looked at me then, not accusing, not pleading, but searching, as if hoping I would say this was all a mistake, as if I could still undo reality. I said nothing, because the truth was already doing enough damage. Brittany broke first, not into tears, into blame. It was him, she shrieked suddenly, pointing at Declan with manic urgency. He pressured me. He was obsessed with the money. He said his father owed him. I was just trying to hold the marriage together. I did what any wife would do. The betrayal landed visibly. Declan staggered backward as if struck. The woman he had defended, lied for, stolen for, had abandoned him without hesitation. The room felt smaller, tighter, like it was closing in on him. You let me paint a nursery, he screamed. You let me believe my mother would have a grandchild. You let me beg my father like a criminal. That was when he lunged. He vaulted over the defense table, sending legal pads and water pitchers crashing to the floor, reaching for her with raw, animal desperation. Bailiffs tackled him hard, pinning him face down as his sobs tore through the room, uncontrolled and humiliating. Brittany stepped back, smoothing her dress. She looked relieved. The judge stood. His expression was not angry. It was exhausted, the expression of a man who had seen too much greed and too little remorse. Enough, he said quietly. The courtroom froze. He looked at the forged mortgage documents. He looked at the fake medical records. He looked at the transcript of lies delivered under oath. Then he removed his glasses. Counsel, he said to Sterling, your clients have committed perjury in my courtroom. They have submitted forged documents into evidence. They have engaged in a conspiracy to defraud this court and the defendant. Sterling said nothing. He was already packing his briefcase, distancing himself from the fallout. The judge turned to Declan and Brittany. I am referring this entire case to the district attorney's office immediately, he said. Charges will include grand larceny, fraud, forgery, and perjury. Declan collapsed into the chair, head in his hands, the sound he made no longer performative. It was the sound of a man realizing he had been the villain in his own story. Brittany stood rigid, defiant to the end. Before the bailiff could move, the judge leaned forward. "But before you were taken into custody," he said, "I have one question." The room held its breath. "Since there is clearly no baby to consider, and since you both seem eager to blame one another, who wants to go to prison first?" Brittany screamed, not in fear, in fury. She pointed at Declan again, voice shrill, unhinged, desperate to save herself at any cost. Declan didn't resist when they cuffed him. He didn't fight. He just looked at me, mouth moving silently. "Dad." I didn't stand. Not yet. Because this wasn't the end. This was only the moment the lies stopped working. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered. Phones flashed. Words like family fraud and fake pregnancy floated through the air like poison. I walked past them without speaking. Justice had begun, but consequences were still unfolding. And the most painful part was yet to come. The holding corridor smelled like disinfectant and regret. It was narrow, windowless, lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed faintly above our heads. A place designed not for reflection, but for containment. I stood at one end, hands folded behind my back, while Declan sat on a metal bench at the other, wrists cuffed in front of him now. The anger had burned out of him. What remained was something far worse. Emptiness. He looked older than his years. Not because of wrinkles, but because illusion had been stripped from him all at once. People age fastest when their beliefs collapse. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence stretched, thick and awkward, like a conversation neither of us knew how to begin. I could hear distant doors slamming, voices echoing, a system moving forward without caring who it crushed along the way. "I didn't know," he finally said. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. Not defensive, not pleading, just a statement thrown into the air, hoping it would land somewhere soft. "I didn't know she couldn't have kids." "I swear." I nodded slowly. "I know," I said. That surprised him. His head lifted slightly, eyes searching my face for judgment, for anger, for something he could push against. "Then why?" His voice broke. "Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I studied him for a long moment. Because the truth is, parents spend most of their lives intervening, fixing, catching their children before they hit the ground. And sometimes, without realizing it, we teach them that gravity isn't real. "You weren't listening anymore," I said quietly. "You weren't asking for guidance. You were asking for compliance." His shoulders sagged. "I just wanted what everyone else had," he muttered. "A house, stability, a future. You wanted it handed to you," I replied, without understanding the cost. That stung. I could see it in his eyes, not because it was cruel, but because it was accurate. Footsteps approached. An officer stopped a few feet away, waiting patiently. Time was almost up. Declan swallowed. "She said you never cared about us," he said. "That you loved money more than people." I exhaled slowly. "That's how manipulators work," I said. "They take your insecurities and give them a voice that sounds like love." He nodded once. A single, sharp movement. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "No," I said. "You chose poorly. That's different." The officer cleared his throat. "Time." Declan stood. The chains rattled softly as he turned toward me. Eyes glassy, red-rimmed, stripped of pride. "Will you visit?" he asked. The question wasn't about jail. It was about whether he still had a father. I didn't answer immediately. "I don't know," I said finally. "That depends on who you decide to be when no one is watching." They led him away. This time I did stand, but I didn't follow. The sentencing came weeks later. No dramatics. No outbursts. Just facts, timelines, and consequences. Declan received 3 years. Brittany received 5. The judge's voice never wavered as he read the decisions aloud, as if this outcome had been inevitable from the moment the first lie was told. Brittany never looked at me. Not once. Pride, even in defeat. Declan did. There was no accusation in his gaze now. Only understanding. The kind that comes too late to save anything, but early enough to hurt for the rest of your life. When it was over, I walked out alone. Again, the city moved around me, indifferent and alive. Traffic lights changed. People laughed on sidewalks. Somewhere, a couple argued about dinner plans. Life did not pause for broken families or courtroom confessions. It never does. I sold a house within a month. The one Catherine loved. The one filled with echoes and framed photographs that no longer felt like memories, only reminders. I kept very little. A watch, a photo, her cookbook with handwritten notes in the margins. I moved into a smaller apartment overlooking the lake, high enough that the noise of the city softened into something distant, something manageable. I donated a large portion of what remained to causes Catherine believed in. Education funds, medical research, quiet checks written without plaques or announcements. Money, when used correctly, doesn't need an audience. The call came one evening as I watched the sun bleed into the water. Cook County Correctional Facility. I stared at the phone for a long time, long enough for it to stop ringing. I pour myself a drink instead, not to celebrate, to mark an ending. People talk about revenge as if it brings relief, as if exposing the truth restores what was lost. It doesn't. It only stops the bleeding. Healing is a separate process, and no court can order it. I thought about my son, not the man who stood in court, but the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest during storms. I wondered if he would ever forgive himself. I wondered if I would ever fully forgive him. Some questions don't have deadlines. Why did know was this? Love without boundaries destroys both sides. Protection without accountability breeds entitlement. And family, when weaponized, becomes the most efficient form of theft. As night settled over the lake, the city lights flickered on one by one. I stood there quietly, hands resting on the glass, feeling the weight of everything that had passed and everything that would never be. The accounts were closed. The truth had been spoken, and what remained wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Cold, honest, unforgiving, but finally mine.